Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing absolutely fine. I welcome you all to today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis, where we have taken up the most important news stories for you from today's Hindu newspaper, and we will decode it from both the mains and the prelims examination point of view. These are the articles that we have taken up from the Hindu newspaper for today. From the mains examination point of view, the first thing that we'll be discussing is the role of the speaker of the Lok Sabha or the speaker of the Legislative Assembly. The reason why this article has been written is with respect to what is happening in Maharashtra. Now in Maharashtra, ever since we have seen a split in case of Shiv Sena, with a lot of members of the Shiv Sena, a lot of MLAs deciding to go to the other side. All eyes have been on the speaker to decide upon the disqualification question of these members. As you know, under the anti-defection law, it is the speaker who takes the final call. However, that decision is still pending. There is no final verdict from Maharashtra, and thus this article has been written about what the role of the speaker should be ideally, and as compared to that, what is the speaker exactly doing in multiple states in India. Second article is about India's economic growth, where the author says that numbers or data which show that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world is actually misleading. In reality, the base of India's GDP is actually so low that even if we grow at 8% continuously, it will take a long time for us to enter into the middle income countries and then go towards the developed world. So there is an article written on this on page number 7. It talks a lot about facts, numbers, data about our growth, about where is India headed right now, and what are the numbers that we should look into. Third article is about the Indian Railways, how Indian Railways is not earning enough money for itself, how the debt on the Indian Railways is mounting, how the Indian Railways is spending most of its budget in just paying off the debt. What is the current situation on the Indian Railways? Can we expect it to be improved? This is what the third article is about. The fourth article is about the recent development in the U.S Venezuela ties, a country in South America on which the Americans had placed sanctions for a long time. But now it seems that there may be light at the end of the tunnel, where the US has decided to ease off the sanctions that they had imposed on Venezuela. We'll be discussing what that issue is, why were the sanctions imposed at the first place, and what is the US thinking of gaining from taking back the sanctions. Then from the prelims point of view, a couple of news stories. First, the government of India, most probably by December, will release the Vision India 2047 document. It's a document that talks about how India aims to achieve the developed status by 100 years of its independence, that is by 2047. What is it that we should hope for? What is it that the government is aiming to do? Then the last article here would be about the developed countries not achieving their net zero targets or not being on track to achieve the net zero targets. So we have an upcoming meeting in Dubai where the world over the countries will come together to discuss about the goals that they had set for themselves for carbon emissions. The sad part is, as per the current status, as per the current data, most of the countries, especially the developed countries, don't seem to be on track. These are the articles that we will be discussing today. So let's not delay any further. Let's start with the very first article. So the first article, as I said, is about the role of the speaker. The role of the speaker of the Legislative Assembly of the states. Now, the gist of the article is that once a speaker has been elected, either in the Lok Sabha or in the Legislative Assembly, the expectation is that the speaker will now work independently. Means the speaker would not think of favoring the political party that he or she belonged to. The expectation of the speaker is that the speaker will be working in an unbiased manner. But in most cases, that is not the reality. In most cases, we see the speaker trying to work to give advantage to the party to which the speaker originally belonged. We have seen this in case of Lok Sabha as well over many years, and we have seen in case of the state assemblies as well. Over here, there are two important powers of the speaker that have been discussed in this article. The two important powers are, first, with respect to the money bill, and second, with respect to the anti-defection law. For those who don't know, a quick reminder, a money bill will be considered as a money bill only and only if it is certified as a money bill by the Lok Sabha Speaker. As you know, the money bill has a lot of special provisions. It requires the President's assent first to be introduced. It can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha does not have any powers over it. Rajya Sabha can only discuss it for 14 days at max. They cannot even make a change. They can just suggest changes, so on and so forth. For the money bill to be given all these privileges that a money bill has, it is essential, it is mandatory that the Lok Sabha Speaker has to put the stamp and say that yes, this is a money bill. Now, this is the power that the Lok Sabha Speaker or the Speakers of the Legislative Assemblies have misused, especially the Lok Sabha Speaker. The reason being, when the ruling party thinks that there is an important law that they have to pass and they don't have enough support in the Rajya Sabha, they use the Speaker's office, they convince the Speaker to call that bill as the money bill, so that that bill does not have to be passed in the Rajya Sabha. So the Lok Sabha Speaker has a power in his hands that he can actually call a bill as a money bill and neglect the powers of the Rajya Sabha. This has been misused multiple times because earlier the provision was that the decision of the Speaker cannot be challenged. Whatever the Speaker decides in case of the money bill will be final. But when these powers were misused multiple times, the Supreme Court also said that we cannot just keep our eyes closed when the Speaker is misusing their powers. The second important provision with respect to the Speaker's power is the anti-defection law. As all of you know, the anti-defection law that is written in the 10th schedule, in simple terms says that if a legislator chooses to change his or her party, for example, you are a member of parliament from the BJP, you decide to resign from the BJP, join some other party, in that case you will be disqualified from your membership. Now the important question is, who takes a decision of disqualification? Under the anti-defection law, the decision of disqualification is taken by the presiding officer. Means in case of the Lok Sabha Speaker, or in case of the Legislative Assembly, the Legislative Assembly Speaker will decide on the question of disqualification in case of anti-defection law. This is where the problem starts. Let's imagine a very simple scenario. In today's parliament, what do you think are the chances that someone from the BJP will leave the BJP to join the Congress, as compared to what are the chances that someone from the Congress will leave the Congress and join the BJP? Just think of it. It is very obvious that when a member of the parliament or a member of the Legislative Assembly would want to change sides, they would want to go towards the more powerful side, towards the side that is in power. So there is a much higher chance that in the parliament, for example, a Congress MP might want to shift to the BJP. Now let's imagine this happens, that a Congress MP shifts to the BJP. Ideally, the person should be disqualified. The disqualification decision has to be taken by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Now the Lok Sabha Speaker belongs to the BJP. So ideally, in an unbiased world, the Speaker should decide to disqualify this member of parliament. But what happens in this case? The Speaker delays the decision. Why? Because the Speaker is showing loyalty towards their own party. That's a random example of how anti-defection law is misused, because the Speaker has this power to decide on disqualification. The other part of the problem is, in case of anti-defection law, there is no time limit for the Speaker to decide on when to take the decision. In fact, this has happened in case of Manipur. In 2017, we saw in Manipur, multiple members of the Legislative Assembly changed their side. But even then, the Speaker did not take any decision for many months. In fact, the members of the Legislative Assembly who changed the side were even made the ministers. And even then, the Speaker did not take a decision. When the matter went to the Supreme Court got very angry and asked the Speaker to decide within a set time frame. That issue is still to be seen in case of Maharashtra. In case of Maharashtra again, we have seen that the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly Speaker has still not decided what to do with the members who have changed their side within the Shiv Sena. Now this is where this article has been written. The Chief Justice of India recently made his displeasure very clear that he is not happy with the fact that the Speaker has not taken the decision. Also, if you look at the office of the Speaker originated in Britain. The idea was that the Parliament needed someone to talk on their behalf to the King. They wanted someone to represent all the members of the House to the King. And that is how the person was called the Speaker, that you speak on our behalf to the King. The idea of the Speaker was that the Speaker would be an unbiased individual, would not speak from one side or the other. However, in most democracies, that is not true today. In most democracies, there is an office of the Speaker. However, the Speaker's office, usually we have seen, is biased in favor of the party that he or she belongs to. Now, how do you expect the Speaker to be unbiased? There are a couple of provisions that you need to understand. Since the office of the Speaker originated in Britain, let's take the British example. So in Britain, there are a couple of things that we need to understand. The first thing, as soon as someone becomes a Speaker, they resign from their party. They are not a part of their party anymore. In India, there is no law that says that the Speaker must resign from their party. In India, even after you become the Speaker, you can continue being a member of the party, which is the case even today. Although, interestingly, we have made this exception in the anti-defection law. If you look at the anti-defection law, one of the exceptions is that if a person is appointed as the Speaker and he or she resigns from the party to take up the Speaker's post, the person shall not be disqualified. But that has not happened. The Speaker in India usually does not resign from their party. In Britain, there is also one very interesting thing that means once a Speaker, always a Speaker. Once a Speaker, always a Speaker. Now, what do you mean by this? Let's understand the situation. Why does a Speaker want to favor his party or her party? There can be two reasons for that. One, maybe they are loyal to their party. They want to support their party because the party supported them. And second, and the biggest reason behind this way of working for the Speaker is the Speaker wants to make sure that they get the party support to win their next election. The Speaker also at the end of the day is a member of the Parliament only, right? So he would also want to win the next election. So a Speaker would favor his or her party, hoping that in the next election they would get support from their own party. This is where in Britain we have a concept called once a Speaker, always a Speaker. Meaning that whoever becomes a Speaker in the next election, the next general election, no political party would field a candidate against the Speaker. If you take India's example, Om Birla, who is the Lok Sabha Speaker, when 2024 elections happen, whichever seat that he is contesting from, like say Kota in Rajasthan, no other party will field any candidate so that he wins automatically. So the Speaker is kind of given the protection that don't worry, you will be elected in the next term no matter what. That is the British concept of once a Speaker, always a Speaker. In India, we have not seen this. In India, in fact, there are many examples of the Speaker not acting in an unbiased manner. As per the author, he has given multiple examples. For example, the author says, the leader of the Congress party in Lok Sabha, Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, was suspended when he said something against the Prime Minister. On the other hand, member of the BJP, that is Ramesh Bidhuri, he passed communal comments against a member of the BSP, that Danish Ali, but again no action was taken against him. So there is different yardsticks that are being used to measure similar kind of offences. Not just this, Speaker also has the power to decide which bill will be given to the committees for further scrutiny. In Indian polity, all of you would have read about the different stages of passing of the bill. The second stage is the committee stage, where the bill is given to the committee, where the bill is scrutinized, the bill takes its final shape. It is the Speaker who decides whether the bill is to be given to the committee or not. Increasingly, we have seen lesser and lesser number of bills are going to the committee. The bills are introduced, within a few minutes they are discussed and they are just passed. That is also a very, very bad sign. As per the author, 60% of the bills were given to the committees from 2004 to 2014. while now the value is less than 25% from 2014 to 2023. That also indicates that maybe, just maybe, the speaker is working more in favor of the ruling party who wants to introduce the bills or get their laws passed quickly, as compared to running the house in an unbiased manner in the interest of everyone. Now, coming back to the question of the anti-defection law. As I said, the anti-defection law gives disproportionate power to the speaker or the presiding officer to take a decision on the disqualification of the member that is involved. The Supreme Court also realized that this may be a lot of power given to the speaker, which should be rectified. In 1992, in the famous Quijotto-Holohan case, minority judgment, minority means lesser number of judges, agreed to the fact that the power to decide on disqualification to be given to the speaker is actually against our democratic principles. Because in most cases, the speaker would be from the ruling party, as we have seen. And when someone joins the ruling party from the opposition party, there is no chance that he or she will be disqualified. So in the Quijotto-Holohan judgment, the Supreme Court tried to reverse this, but it was a minority view. Minority number of judges agreed to this, and that is why it was not agreed. I gave you an example of Manipur as well, where in Manipur, the speaker just did not decide on the decision of the disqualification. When this matter went to the Supreme Court, again the Supreme Court said that the parliament should amend the constitution to have or establish a tribunal to be headed by judges to decide on such disqualification, rather than the speaker getting the powers. But again, think of it in this way. Why would a ruling party want to give away their powers and let this be decided by a tribunal rather than this being decided by their own member? So no ruling party in their right mind would want to change this. Now, I would like to share with you a bit of data, a bit of facts about how the working of the parliament has evolved, and to support the argument here given by the author. The author here, as you said, says that a lot of bills that used to go to the committees earlier to scrutinize further, to be discussed in detail, are not going to the committees now. We have seen this data here as well. This is a data till winter session of 2021. 16th Lok Sabha, only 27% bills went to the committee. 16th Lok Sabha means 2014 to 2019. 17th Lok Sabha is the ongoing Lok Sabha, where very few bills have actually gone to the committee stage. They are just introduced and passed within a few minutes. In fact, Derek O'Brien, the TMC member of the parliament, famously made a statement a few months back. He said that the bills in the parliament these days get passed in a shorter time period as compared to what is required to make a bhel puri. That's a statement that he gave. That it takes more time to make a bhel puri today than to get a bill passed in the parliament, because the bills are just not going to any parliamentary committee. The government is just randomly passing them. There's also a bit of data here about the working hours of the committees. Again, if you look at the 16th Lok Sabha, that is from 2014 to 2019, the number of hours for which almost each of these committees has worked has reduced. The Committee of Agriculture, External Affairs Committee, Rural Development Estimates Committee, Public Account Committee, any of these committees, see the number of hours that they have worked. There is a drastic reduction in 16th Lok Sabha as compared to the previous Lok Sabha. Now, what has the Supreme Court done in this regard? The Supreme Court has heard various issues regarding the role of the speaker and regarding the alleged biased behavior of the speaker. The Supreme Court has decided to give multiple verdicts, but somehow they have not really made an impact in reality. In 2016, the Supreme Court directed the Speaker of Manipur to rule on disqualification within 3 months. In 2020, the Supreme Court said to Manipur Speaker that you have to rule within 3 months of the person changing the side, whether the person has to be disqualified or not. The Supreme Court also in 2006 highlighted that the confidence of the role of the speaker has to be that the speaker must maintain impartiality as much as possible. Only and only then the people will believe that the speaker is working in an unbiased manner. Interestingly, speaker is a constitutional office. Despite the speaker having so much powers, despite the speaker having such a high rank in the order of precedence, we still see that the Speaker's office has not seen the kind of reforms that it is requiring. The reason being that why would a party, or any party for that matter, in power want to give away their powers? Why would they want to compromise on the powers of the Speaker? And that is the primary reason why we do not see reforms in the working of the Speaker. The next article that we have here is from Economics. It is giving a reality check for India's growth data. Every few months, we see growth data of India either internally or from agencies such as the IMF, World Bank, when they estimate that India will be growing, let's say, at 7%, 7.5%, 8%, etc. And you see the government of India usually rejoicing in the fact that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world. But the point is, as per the author, that this GDP data, just looking at the percentage, will never give you the true story. Just looking at the GDP percentage means that you are hiding behind it a lot of important problems: lack of employment, lack of basic infrastructure, lack of safety net. There are a lot of issues that we are hiding. I want to give you a very simple example here to understand how the GDP percentage, the GDP growth percentage may not be the true indicator of what we require. Let's take a simple example. What is India's GDP right now? So India's GDP, and this was a tweet that our finance minister did a few months back. Our finance minister a few months back tweeted that India's GDP has officially touched $3.75 trillion mark. Okay. So this is what India's GDP is, $3.75 trillion mark. Now what is China's GDP? They are approaching $20 billion. For the sake of calculation, for easier calculation, let's make it 20 trillion. They are slightly short of 20 trillion. They are about 19 and a half or something. Now let's take this example. Let's assume there is a situation where India grows at 10%. Now there have been many years since we saw a 10% growth. But let's assume something wonderful happens and India has a 10% growth rate of GDP. Now what does it mean? 10% growth rate means 10% of this. This is how much our GDP has increased. 10% of this would be about, let's say, $375 billion. Okay? As compared to that, if China grows at only 2%, you'll be very happy. We are growing at 10, China is only growing at 2. But even if China grows at 2%, 2% of 20 trillion will still give them 400 billion. It will still give them $400 billion. Means if you calculate the base at which we are actually growing as compared to the base at which China is growing, even if they grow at 2% and we grow at 10%, their growth will be higher than India. This is where the problem is, what we do not understand. This is why we should not just be happy because we saw the GDP percentage data going in. The percentage of GDP, even if it is 10% for a long period of time, it will still take a long time for us to actually go into the next level. Yes, we are all set to become the world's third largest economy, but that's a function of our population, that's a function of our size. But if you really have to look into the per capita numbers, we still have a long way to catch up. This is what the author is saying. The problem behind all this India's slow growth, India not growing enough, is number one, there has been a weak mass demand. People are not buying enough, people are not consuming enough. The reason why people are not buying enough, consuming enough is, let's take a simple example. Let's say you have 100 rupees in your bank account, or let's say you have 100 rupees in your hand. Now you either have an option to buy something, you either have an option to buy a t-shirt, or buy chocolates, or ball, or bat, or whatever you want, or you have an option to keep it in your bank account. Now what will you do? If you have confidence that even after spending this 100, I will earn more money, then you will not be shy of spending this money. You will not be underconfident. You will spend this money with confidence because you know that you can earn more. But if you are not confident enough, if you think that if I spend this money, I will not be able to earn more, then you will obviously not spend this money. You will try to keep this in your pocket. That means it will be a low demand in the market. Low demand basically means that you do not have enough confidence that you will earn money in the long run. You don't have enough confidence of how much your earning capacity is. Now, whenever you ask these questions to the government, usually the government refers to the COVID lockdown. The government refers to the global slow growth of the economy. But the reality is, as per the author, India's economy was slowing down even before the lockdown took place. Even before we had seen the COVID-19 lockdown shocking the entire economy of the entire world. If you look at the numbers here, by 2012-2013, GDP growth had fallen to 4.5%. In fact, GDP growth came down to 3.9% before the pandemic. So even before the pandemic, the situation had become extremely, extremely bad. The numbers were revised because the government changed the way in which the GDP is calculated, but that does not really reflect in any change in the ground position where we stand right now. If you see how India measures its GDP as per the author, that is also a faulty method. In India, income from production is taken as the role of the calculation of the GDP. Let's take an example. So if a factory produces 100 cars and let's say one car is of 10 lakh rupees, we will say that the GDP would be 100 crore. So we take or calculate GDP from production. How much have we produced? As per the author, this is not true. This is not the perfect method to calculate. Calculation should be how many cars have been sold. If all these 100 cars were not sold, then this should not be a part of the GDP. If out of these only 50 cars were sold, then the GDP should be 50 cars into 50 lakh. That is 5 crores. So our expenditure, that is our income, they are the real indicators of the GDP. But in India, we calculate the GDP on the basis of how much production is happening, even though it might be selling, it might not be selling. Thus, there are a lot of issues as per the author. The author is saying that the weakness in demand still persists. In the post-COVID era, we still see that the numbers might be slightly up, but the base is so low that even if we see 8%, 7% growth, we are not doing enough for our entire economy. Add to that, there is a drop in private corporate investment as well. I'll just show you data also. Most of India's investment comes from the private sector. When the private sector cuts down on the investment, it is an indication the private sector does not trust the economy. The private sector thinks that they can utilize their money better somewhere else rather than investing in the economy, which is always a bad sign. What has the government done in response? How does the government try to stop this slowing down of the economy? The government has cut down the corporate tax. The government has introduced schemes such as performance-linked incentive scheme. You produce more and you will be getting some incentive from the side of the government. The government has increased capex, that is capital expenditure, hoping that this will increase the confidence of the market and they will start investing more money. Now the problem is this is all a long-term ploy. You can't expect that today the government does or builds a flyover or announces a tax cut and tomorrow all the money will start flowing in the economy. That is not how it usually works. These decisions take a long time in order to get converted to reality. Thus, even if the government is taking these decisions now, we might see the impact of these decisions in the coming years. Now, there are a few data points which help you again decode and understand the problem. If you look at net financial assets, 2022-23, it is decreasing. Financial liabilities of individuals are increasing. Our credit card debt of the individuals is at an all-time high. We buy stuff on the credit cards with EMIs because we don't think that it will pinch us. But the reality is, if you look at how much debt everyone has accumulated on their credit cards, etc., is extremely, extremely high right now. The household borrowings, again, we are borrowing a lot of money from the NBFCs, from insurance lenders, etc., wherever we can get our hands on. Even the savings rate is not as high as it used to be. So all these numbers, all these data do not see extremely promising right now as where we stand. This is a graph that shows you how public sector investment is also declining. See, there has always been more public sector investment than private sector investment. There's always been more private sector investment in India as compared to public sector. But even the private sector, the corporates are not investing a lot of money in the economy because they do not see this as a right time. As you can see here, there has been a dip in investment by the private sector, and it has been seen in the last 10 to 12 years for now. Apart from this, if you see credit that is available to the private sector and their investment behavior, that is also different. Means you might assume that if the banks are able to give more loan to the companies will invest that money in the market. But even that is not true. Assuming that easier availability of loans to the companies will lead to more money being invested in the market, even that is not being proven to be true here. Even if the government hopes that they can make it easier for the companies to get loans from the banks, the same money does not flow in the market in the form of investment. That is also a worrying sign going forward. The third article, again from economics, from infrastructure especially, is about the railways. Now, railways is an integral part of India's economy for a lot of reasons. It was such an integral part that for many, many years we had a separate railway budget and we had a separate general budget. The reason being that the Railways Ministry was the most significant one. Now today, most part of our budget goes to defense and not to the railways. Today, railways is a part of the general budget. But even then, railways is the lifeline of India that connects the entire country. The problem with the railways is we have not seen improvement in how the railways operates in terms of the revenue. Whether the railways is able to provide you better infrastructure, better facilities, will all be dependent on how much revenue they are earning, and that is not improving over time. The author here is saying that the Indian Railways, now because it doesn't have a separate budget of their own, even if they take some loan, it is not really seen in the public. If it would have been a separate railway budget, everyone would have noticed when the railway takes a big loan. But now because the railway budget is a part of the general budget only, we do not really notice when they take huge loans. But that is a big problem. Even today, the railways has been taking a lot of money from the market. The problem is that money is not being used to update their infrastructure. Rather, that money actually is used to pay back their original debt, to pay back the interest that they have accumulated. Indian Railways, for example, if you can see here, Indian Railways repayment burden, thus the principal repayment that they pay back is about 22,229 crores. While the interest repayment is more than that, 23,782 crore is just the interest repayment. Together, 17% of their revenue just goes into paying back the money that they have taken. In 2015-16, it was 10% of their income. 10% of their income used to be spent in paying back the loan. Now that is 17% of their income. Now there are two ways to look at this. One argument is that products such as railways is actually public service. Government should not try to earn profit from the railways. The job of the railways is to give a cheaper mode of transportation, long distance transportation to the people, so that people can travel, people can do business, and the government should not hope to make profit from the railways. That is fine. But making a profit and making railways at least self-sustainable are two different things. Even if you don't want to make a profit, you at least want to have railways at a self-sustainable level where they are not eating out government's revenue from the other sources. This is where the problem starts. Yes, the railways helps businesses by being able to transfer stuff from one place to other at a cheaper cost. It helps in increasing tax revenue. It allows more job opportunities for people to travel, to go or take other jobs. But none of these are reasons enough to just leave the railways in all these bunch of losses that it is actually showing in its own sheet. It is time for the railways to be at least self-sustainable and be much more aware of the revenue that they are earning and where it is being spent. Now, to understand the railways, understand how it works. Basically, railways has two main functions. First, passengers and other freight, that is the goods that they transfer from one place to the other. Now, if you understand this, if you are someone who travels in trains very often, you would have noticed train tickets have hardly become cheaper in the past 10-12 years or even more. You are paying the same price for the ticket that you used to pay for 12-15 years earlier. The reason is not because nothing has become costly. Everything has become costlier. Diesel, coal, everything has become costlier. Salary has increased. But the government just does not want to increase the prices of passenger tickets. Why? Because the government thinks that it will be an unpopular decision. People will be unhappy. People will not vote for the government if they increase the railway ticket prices. So, Government of India almost on purpose makes the railway go into losses when it operates only passengers. If you look at only the passenger services, the railways made a loss of 68,000 crore in 2021-22, just 1 year. How does a railway make up for these losses? By charging you extra for freight, by charging you more money, by earning its profit, by transporting goods from one place to the other. Now, there are two ways to look at it. If the railways is earning so much profit from the freight business, means they are taking higher amount of money to transport goods. That means that cost of good transportation is increasing. Eventually, commodities will become costlier and you and me will have to pay more money for that. So, indirectly, it is us only who is actually paying this money. Even if you look at the growth of railways freight business, that has not increased at such a high level. It has increased by only 1% in the past year. When the economy has increased by 7%, there has only been a 1% increase in the freight volume. Also, the amount of goods transported in India through railways is decreasing considerably. Now, 27% of India's goods are transported through railways. At the time of independence, it used to be 80%. Now, a lot of it goes through road, some of it through water as well. But the share of railways to transport goods has reduced drastically. Maybe the railways is not doing a job that is attractive enough because it's charging much more for freight businesses than it should. That is just to offset the loss they are making in the passenger business. This is where the policy of the railways has to change. Most of the stuff that the railway transports is actually coal. About 45% of railways capacity is close to utilized for coal only. Then there's iron ore, cement that are about 10% each. These are the main products that are transported from railways from one place to the other. It's used for private transportation as well, but it is mostly for this government product that it is used to transport. Now, when the railway transports coal in large quantities that is used to produce power, when the railway charges more to transport this coal, obviously the cost of power generation will be higher and we will have to pay higher electricity bill. So it's all connected. Even if you don't have to pay higher amount of money for your passenger tickets, you still have to pay higher money indirectly for the commodities that the railway is transporting. Now there's one more information that I want to share with you. Whenever you talk about railway reforms in India, the one committee that has to be mentioned time and time again is the Vivek Devroy committee. The Vivek Devroy committee a few years back was formed to suggest how to reform Indian railway system. And these are the things, some of the things are that they suggested. For example, they suggested having a better accounting model as compared to what the Indian railways have. Privatization of non-core business. So, railway should only focus on running the trains. All the non-core business like running hospitals, running schools. So, I don't know if you know this, there are railway hospitals also, the railway schools also. Catering, real estate development, housing construction for their employees, etc. Building of coaches, all of that should be privatized. Only the running of the trains should be the core priority for the railways. Railway manufacturing company should also be expanded. We should make it much more open for participation from the experts from the private sector. encourage private entry, have independent regulators. Let the independent regulators, for example, decide the functioning of the railways, if the fare has to be increased or not. The government should not decide whether the fare is to be increased or not, because the politicians will never increase the fare because they don't think that the people will like it. So rather than the politician deciding that, let an independent regulator decide that. It will be better for everyone in the long run. The next article that we have here is about the U.S. Venezuela ties. Now, what exactly is this news all about? Let's first look at the map and then we'll come back here. So this is Venezuela. It's a country in the northern part of South American continent, close to America. What happened was America a few years back imposed a lot of sanctions on Venezuela. The reason being, US thought that Venezuela is not working properly or there is no democracy left there. Venezuela has also been extremely close to Russia. They have a history of being towards the communist ideology. USA thought that by imposing sanctions on Venezuela, which has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, they would be able to enforce Venezuela and agree to whatever the US wants. However, that has not been working well for the US. The reason being, Venezuela, because it has such humongous oil reserves, it supplied a lot of oil in the international market, and the entire economy of Venezuela was dependent on this oil income. As long as they were earning a good income from oil, they were all happy. They were giving huge subsidies to their people. For example, in most of the Middle Eastern countries today, West Asia, there is no income tax. The countries don't take income tax from their people because the governments don't need it. They have so much money of their own. Similarly, Venezuela used to give a lot of subsidies to its people when it used to earn all that revenue from the oil. But the US government, when it imposed sanctions, since then Venezuela's economy has deteriorated considerably. It has deteriorated to such a position that now Venezuela is one of the poorest countries in South America, despite having so much proven oil reserves. This is where the US again comes into the picture. Why? The US thinks that Venezuela right now is coming too close to countries such as Russia, China, Iran, and now it is time to remove those sanctions, maybe bring it closer to the US so that the US government can still have some say in how Venezuela will be working. So when Joe Biden became the president of the US, he had said that the next election of Venezuela should happen in an open, unbiased manner. If the government agrees to hold elections in an unbiased manner, the US will think of reducing its sanctions, and that is what has happened. The opposition leader, that is Maria Corina Machado, she has been elected as the main opponent of the sitting president, and there will be free and fair elections supposedly in Venezuela in 2024. Also, add to that the angle of the Ukraine-Russia war. Again, because of the Ukraine-Russia war, the global oil supply coming in from Russia has been disrupted. We have seen fluctuation in the oil prices around the world. That also means that the US wants countries such as Venezuela to supply their oil in the global market to stabilize the oil prices. Venezuela's last 10 years have been extremely tough. 2013, they used to be fourth largest economy of South America. And then because of the American sanctions, they became one of the poorest countries in the entire region. There was a time in Venezuela where inflation touched 1.3 million percentage. 1.3 million percentage. That was the inflation that Venezuela saw. This is when they had the worst of their time, when they were just not able to supply their oil in the international market because of the US sanctions. Now, what will happen going forward? How is it that Venezuelans expect the situation to be improved? They expect that they would have more access to American markets. They would be able to sell more oil and they would be able to earn more money. Also, there have been lakhs and lakhs of people leaving Venezuela because of all these problems, economic problems. There has been increase in crime. There have not been any jobs left in the country. In fact, International Criminal Court is investigating a matter against Venezuelan government, also about the war crimes that have been imposed on their own citizens. The US government is hoping that Venezuela can now move towards a democratic process, and this will improve the situation in Venezuela, thus creating a more stable oil supply in the global market and improving peace in America's neighborhood. Now, the story of U.S. Venezuela relationship is not very old. If you look at how the relationship became bad or deteriorated, it's not an old story. The problem started in the mid 2010s only. That was a time that Hugo Chavez came to power in Venezuela. Now, his policies were different as compared to what America wanted. His policies were more socialist. His policies were about giving a lot more subsidy as compared to the others. He was coming much closer to countries such as Russia, China, which America did not like. America thought that this is a danger very near to their country. That is when they started imposing sanctions and demanded free and fair elections to change the government. Now, recently, the Americans have realized the fact that in order to bring countries such as Venezuela to their side, they have to ease out some of the hard stand that they have been taking earlier. With Iran, for example, America had always taken a very hard stand, but they did sign the nuclear agreement with Iran as well, the P5+1, the JCPOA agreement, although it was backtracked by Donald Trump. But America has realized that in order to bring countries to their side, they would have to ensure that they ease out on their stand, and that is what is happening in case of Venezuela as well. Historically, they have had close relationship. Before we had oil boom in America, before America had the shale gas boom, lot of oil for America was supplied by Venezuela only. It was only under Hugo Chavez rule that the situation became very bad, and now under current president, that is Maduro, it has become even worse, with the two sides holding their fort, not willing to give anything in return. But now the situation seems to be improving in the long run. These are all the articles from the mains examination point of view that we had. Now there are a couple of important articles, news stories from the prelims point of view. First, the Government of India is planning to release the Vision 2047 document very soon. As the name suggests, this is a document about where does the government want to see India on the 100th year of our independence. The goal that the government has set is we want to make sure that India becomes a $30 trillion economy by 2047, and our per capita income should be about $18,000 to $20,000. Just for comparison, right now, again, these are not exact numbers, but right now India's per capita income is close to $2,200. So this is a jump that we are hoping to take. I already told you the GDP that we have. So India's economy is right now $3.75 trillion. So we are hoping to jump it to $30 trillion, and we want to make our per capita income from $18,000 to $20,000. This is what the vision document is. The government wants to basically highlight how we can achieve that, what are the priorities that the government has to set. Also, the government is worried that India might fall into something called a middle income trap. What is a middle income trap? A lot of countries which used to be poor have been able to enter the middle income category, but they have not been able to go above that. Middle income category is $5,000 to $6,000 per capita, although we are almost at half of that. But many countries such as Argentina is a prime example, who have been able to come to the middle income group have not been able to go higher. This is a problem that India also might face in the future, and we are already getting prepared for that. We are already hoping that once we reach this situation, we do not just stay stuck in this middle income part. Also, there are concerns why we do not have many big companies in India that represent the world. About 3.5% of the world's GDP is of India, but still we do not really have many large banks that are renowned worldwide, do not have many well-known legal consultancies, accountancy firms from India. We do have IT firms that are known worldwide, but even on those IT firms, you might not know about a software that they produce that is used around the entire world. So there is a need for India to focus there as well. Why is it that we do not have more world-renowned companies? This is how you usually, or the World Bank usually defines low income countries, lower middle income countries, upper middle income and higher income countries. Where India is right now is low middle income. This is where India is right now. This is how the World Bank categorizes. Again, there is no other official categorization of are you a middle income country or high income country. This is the World Bank's categorization. This is how they define a country's income level. India is somewhere here, lower middle income country. Now in 1960, if you look at India's journey, 1960 India was obviously a low income country with a per capita income about 6% of that of the US. 2008 we reached about 12% of that of the US. But India's increase in the income has also kind of stalled. We have not been going at a very fast pace. One of the reasons is for the country to jump from one level to the other level, they usually focus a lot on manufacturing. Manufacturing has always been India's weakness. Usually in usual economies, we see a trend from agriculture to manufacturing to services. That is the usual progression. In case of India, from agriculture, we have jumped straight to services. Manufacturing sector in India has still been neglected for a long time. That is why we do not see enough jobs in India, because manufacturing is the one sector which has the chance or possibility of producing the most number of jobs as well. This is how ideally a country jumps from one level to the other level. The first stage is dependency on agriculture. Second stage comes when you focus on simple manufacturing, like what is happening in Vietnam. Then you go to better industries, again by technology coming in from foreign countries such as Malaysia and Thailand have done. Then you go towards creativity. You manage your own technology like Korea, Chinese Taipei or Taiwan. And then the fourth stage, you are capable enough to innovate on your own, Japan, US, etc. Again, something that India has to focus on in the long run. The last article that we have is, and I'm sorry to say we are ending on a sadder note, is that the developed countries and most countries around the world are nowhere near the target that they had made for themselves in terms of carbon emissions. The nationally determined contributions that the countries around the world had made, most of them are all set to miss their target. In fact, the developed world, which is responsible for 3/4 of the carbon emissions in the world, will emit 38% more carbon in 2030 than they have committed to. Countries which are mainly responsible for this are US, Russia and even the European Union. So before they lecture us, before they tell us that you are the ones responsible, this kind of a report should be an eye-opener for the developed world. We are about to have the UNFCCC meeting in Dubai very soon in November and December. This is where the countries will give a report card of where they stand in terms of their nationally determined contributions, and it doesn't seem like most of the countries are on track. As you know, the Paris Climate Summit of 2015 was the groundbreaking summit where all the countries had submitted their nationally determined contributions of what they want to achieve. But the reality is most of them are nowhere as compared to where they have to be to achieve the 1.5 degree level target and keep the global temperatures below that. Having said that, there are a few countries that have good news. For example, Belarus, Norway. They are the only two developed countries that are on their path to achieve the 2030 target. Japan and Kazakhstan are very close to achieving the target. They will miss by probably 0.1% only. But most of the developed world is just not on track as compared to where they want to be, as compared to how they want the developing countries to behave. If you look at how the number stands, USA's target was 50% by 2030 and they'll only achieve 22%. Russia's target was 70% reduction, they'll achieve 48%. Japan will miss by 1%. UK, Northern Ireland will also miss it. Norway will be able to achieve the target and Belarus will also be able to achieve the target as per the report that has been published here in this Hindu newspaper. Where does India stand? This is India, one of the few countries that has in fact increased its target. In 2015, the target that we had made for ourselves was to cut down 33-35% of emissions from 2005 level. We have updated a target to 45%. Even our non-fossil fuel electricity capacity, we have increased that target as well, and we are on track to achieve it. In fact, India is one of the very few countries in the world that is on track to achieve the target that we had made for ourselves in Paris 2015. So again, India acting as the leader of the global south, India acting as how a responsible country should going forward. These are the important articles that we had to discuss for today in the Hindu newspaper. There are a couple of practice questions right here in front of you. First question on the role of the speaker. Second question on the role of the Indian Railways. Make sure you go over to our Telegram channel as soon as the video comes to an end. Attend the quiz there. See if you were able to remember the stuff that we discussed. Also, use our answer writing portal. The link you will find in the description of the video. To give answers to these questions, you can read each other's answers, give each other feedback, and learn from each other's mistakes. I'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. for the next session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Till then, have a good day. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.